you have an informed opinion on any topic, then let your voice be heard. That is what we do on Express Yourself. Express Yourself is a production of the Drury University Department of Communication and the Drury University Debate Union, where we teach students the arts and skills of debating and then encourage them to apply those skills in various forms of civil discourse. This week's panelists are Austin Cassidy from Nixon, Missouri. Austin is a junior studying communication. His career goal is to be a business leader. His favorite speaker of all time is Donald Trump. Christopher Cassidy, a senior studying criminology and sociology from Nixon, Missouri. He wants to get his doctorate in criminology and continue to do research. His favorite speaker is Ronald Reagan. Dakota Bowen, a freshman from Springfield, Missouri. He's studying history and secondary education. His dream job is to become a high school history teacher or a history professor. His favorite speaker is Franklin D. Roosevelt. Michelle Boswell, graduating with a bachelor's from Drury and a master's from Mizzou. She's now the director of marketing at ePreciate. Her favorite speaker is Steve Jobs. Our facilitator and moderator is Dr. Charlie DeBerry, director of the Drury University Debate Union. And now, here's Charlie.
Thank you and welcome to our program. Our topic for this session is the legalization of marijuana. I want to thank my fine panelists for being here. And we're going to approach this from the idea that for a few years ago, no one would have even considered the acceptance of marijuana on any kind of wide-scale legal use. But in recent years, many states are making the use of marijuana legal. And so currently it's become important to this particular area because our fine state of Missouri is looking at a couple of different bills that would make marijuana a legal substance. Specifically, we're talking about those Missouri proposals, and I want to go straight to one of our panelists to get this going and ask Chris, why should we make marijuana legal in any form?
Well, America spends $7.6 billion annually on trying to enforce marijuana through law enforcement. Furthermore, 560,000 people are in prison due to some marijuana offense. There are also medical applications to marijuana. For example, we know it's far less addicting than most pain medicines that are used to treat chronic pain now today. And lastly, $63 million were made in taxes when Colorado legalized marijuana.
All right. So you obviously think it's a really good idea. Dakota, is this stuff good for you?
I think it is. There have been many studies on marijuana throughout the years, and there's been no signs of like deadly side effects. 0 people have overdosed from the use of marijuana throughout the years. Where alcohol, there have been yearly there are over 2,200 deaths due to alcohol poisoning due to overconsumption, which just isn't present with marijuana.
Well, okay, Dakota, I want to come back to that parallel argument between marijuana and alcohol. But before I do that, Austin, what's your take on this, one way or the other?
I'd like to bring up the health aspect of talking about the health aspects of marijuana. It's especially harmful for kids. And it contributes to psychosis and schizophrenia addiction, and it causes addictions for 1 in 6 kids who ever use it just once. So 1 in 6 of those kids develops schizophrenia or some other psychosis. And there haven't been any reliable long-term studies done that show whether or not what the health consequences are of smoking marijuana. So I think the fact saying it can't hurt you is a false.
Well, hold on.
Really true statement.
Wait 1 second. I want to let our other guest partake here for just a moment, because now Austin is suggesting that it may not be as clean and sanitized as we think, in terms of it may have some harmful effects. Now, you have a family, and you have children who are probably of the age that they might partake. And does the health threat concern you, or are you pretty comfortable with it?
Well, I think both. I think studies have shown that children who use marijuana at a young age are much more likely to use cocaine or heroin. They've also shown that people at any age who use marijuana are much more likely to experiment with cocaine or heroin, which are highly addictive drugs. I want to also speak to what Austin was saying on the health benefits, is that they know with things like chemotherapy, there are good effects of using marijuana, but there are some ill effects to marijuana smoking. It's been proven that smoking 3 to 4 marijuana cigarettes a day is equal to the damage of your bronchial tubes and your lungs as smoking 20 cigarettes a day. So it also has been shown that smoking marijuana can decrease your immune system. So when we're talking about using it for very ill patients or to treat people, we're also looking at the fact that it can actually decrease their immune system. So there may be some trade-off there, even though it has some beneficial effects.
Well, so do you think that you don't hear a lot of the health problems when these campaigns come up? And I'll bring something up that we may not have time to get into it, but there was an argument made that when California passed their legalization of marijuana, that there's some very highly paid public relations firms who come in, who make a fortune off of just breezing into a state and showing people all the reasons why there's no reason not to have legalized marijuana, because they have a lot of money at stake, and that maybe we don't hear a lot about the health consequences. I haven't studied it to the point to know if there are that many negative health consequences. I know someone who knows someone who who says that there's 4 times as much tar in one joint as there is one cigarette, and that but he didn't consider that any big deal. My point is, do you not fear these health possibilities? Do they not concern you?
Well, first I'd like to speak to what Austin was talking about earlier with marijuana leading to with onset of psychosis. We know, for example, that the set and setting, both sociological terms, the set meaning the predisposition of one's mindset going in before smoking a drug greatly impacts the drug effect on the brain. For example, and because it's illegal, that's going to make new users extremely nervous to it. And so that greatly increases the chances of psychosis and having a bad trip, or you would say. And also, we don't know that just saying that someone who uses marijuana will then go on to use cocaine. It's not because of the marijuana that they're going on to use cocaine. There's a very large percent of the population who uses marijuana who uses only marijuana. It doesn't cause somebody to go on to use cocaine.
I'm going to talk to that, though, because I think what happens is it is a relaxation of how you view certain substances. And one thing that I think that we have to consider, if you look at the number of teenagers who use alcohol, it's significant. And I would argue that part of the reason why is because it is legal at the age of 21. So there is opportunity. If you can get someone to buy it for you, you know it's legal. You see it in places. And so there is a large use in the teenage population, even though they're not of age. And I would argue that with marijuana being legalized, you're going to have the same thing. So perhaps today a kid doesn't really get introduced to marijuana until late high school or college. If it's legal, if it's accessible, if somebody can easily buy it for them where they're not having to buy it from a dealer, I just think that you're going to see an increase of use with younger people.
Well, you could have said the same thing about smoking. However, even though smoking is legal, you don't see a bunch of kids going out and doing it. In fact, there's a huge stigma against smoking because of so much money is being put into creating, educating people about the effects.
That's a great point. But what I would say to that is that we come from a different generation. And so when I was a kid, there was a huge smoking problem with young people. But what's happened is there was so much legislation and there was so much pushback against the tobacco companies that they've had to spend so much money to advertise and to put this education out there. Would you propose that if we made marijuana illegal, that there should also be money put toward doing that same type of pushback campaign so that we're discouraging youth from using it?
Absolutely. I'm highly in favor of taxing marijuana first, and then we can use that money towards education so that people will know the effects of marijuana and they'll be less likely to use it.
Well, I want to ask something along those lines. There was some of our greatest head doctors, psychiatrists, if you will, have suggested that all human beings go through levels of anxiety, particularly as they're growing up, and particularly the adolescent years. And so, one way that they often talk about a way to relieve these anxieties is to turn to euphoric drugs. And do you feel like putting an approval, a legalization on marijuana is an implicit approval to say we are encouraging, or certainly all right with us, to use this anxiety relieving drug as a way to deal with your problems of growing up?
Well, instead of looking at the problems of growing up, we have millions of adult Americans who come home every day, will sit down on the couch, take their shoes off and have a glass of wine. I mean, and they do it for the exact same reasons, to relieve anxiety. And we also know that alcohol is 114 times more toxic than marijuana. So,
well, I mean, are you suggesting then that okay, so adults are coming home and drinking, and you're saying that it would be better if, so the kids aren't going to come home and drink, they're going to come home and smoke a joint. I guess what I'm trying to suggest is, are we suggesting that you should use one of these euphoric drugs, period, regardless of which one, or should we, I'm asking if we are putting an approval on this, if we are encouraging its use by making it legal. Are we encouraging its use?
I'd say if we are encouraging its use by making it legal, I'd say we are, and that's not really one thing we want to do. Next, one thing I'd like to point out is that a lot of people think that, I'd like to go back to the health side of it. If people don't have a stigma attached to marijuana, I think right now, it could easily turn into like the next big tobacco. If kids don't think it's harmful to smoke marijuana in the first place, it could get a lot of people to start smoking it. It could get big corporations in on it to invest millions of dollars to put addictive substances in it, and thus creating a new addictive generation of kids who will be on this and will be hurting their future lives because, and again, we don't know the long-term applications of doing this drug. And so that's one reason I think it might be hesitant to just go ahead and all out legalize marijuana by saying, and using a rationale of, it's not unhealthy, or it's healthy for you. So we gotta be very aware of how we go about that.
Okay, well, a couple of things before I ask you to wrap it up. One is the comment was made about gateway drug, and I wanted to clarify the point that whether it's alcohol or pot or whatever, when a person starts feeling euphoric, the first thing that goes in one's mind is their good judgment. And so what happens is, it's not like it directly leads to something else, but it can directly lead to bad judgment, which can result in you deciding, hey, maybe I wouldn't have drank very much because I don't really think drinking is a good idea, but now that all my inhibitions are relieved because I am pretty high, I think I'll drink some also. And I think that's what people mean by it being a gateway, is it reduces judgment levels, and the National Health Institute didn't talk about judgment levels specifically, but it did say that it impairs cognitive abilities by about 30% during a so many hour period after smoking a joint. So I guess they don't recommend smoking a joint and then studying chemistry, but it does have certain cognitive things. So while the voters of this state are going to decide something in the next couple, 3 months, and we don't know what it is, Missouri is not known to be the most progressive state in the United States. But given what you know, and given that I haven't been watching that closely, but whether there's a big fight for it or against it, I don't know. Given your knowledge, what do you think is going to happen in a couple months? Is Missouri going to pass it? If so, under what kinds of restrictions? That'll be your final question. Do you think it'll get passed? And if so, under what kind of restrictions? Start with my far left, Austin.
Well, I'd like to talk about the bill. The bill proposed gives very little restriction on how much you grow, how much is taxed. It's very vague in its wording. And it also says it's going to be passed based on public voting. And so if that's the case, then I could see it definitely getting passed. The thing I do have concerns about is that because there's such little regulation, major growing could cause problems in the environment. It could cause lots of problems with pesticides, contaminating riverways that we have so many of here in the Ozarks. And I think that's a big issue when talking about it. But I do think if it is a public voting turnout, then I do think it will get passed because it's overwhelmingly looking that way in Missouri.
So a big turnout would be in its favor.
Definitely.
Michelle.
Well, based on what I know about Missouri, how they typically vote, I would say I don't think it will pass, but I would also say that maybe one of the benefits to it being on the ballot is that you might get a much larger voter turnout, which we struggle as a state to get a good turnout. Everyone struggles. So maybe that's one of the positives, is that if you have it on the ballot, you'll get a population out that wouldn't normally turn out.
All right, interesting side benefit. Take it away.
I don't know how the turnout will be for the bill for the general legalization of recreational use. I believe that there will be turnout for that, a large turnout. But based off of some of previous votes in Missouri, I think it's in the air. However, there's another bill, Missouri House Bill 800, which is sponsored by Representative Dave Hinson of St. Clair, which is for the medical marijuana, and I think it's gotten pretty far as of right now, and I think that has a pretty good chance of going through. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Dakota, thank you. And Chris, we're going to give you the final word.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd say it's always dangerous passing a bill without any sanctions and just taking a laissez-faire economics approach to it, such as this bill is suggesting. Therefore, I am against this bill. I think if we do need to, are going to pass a bill to legalize it, we need to do it in appropriate means. We need to have taxes set up just as Colorado did, to where we can tax it, then have those the money gain going towards education and rehabilitation to get people off the drugs. And as to whether it passes or not, I really have no idea, because we are in a very conservative state, and there does seem to be a massive outspoken amount of people for marijuana. However, it's always important to never underestimate the silent majority who will probably vote against it.
Okay, but you haven't bought your seeds yet.
What was that?
You haven't bought your seeds yet.
Not yet.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, panelists. You did a great job, and thank you, viewers, for tuning in to today's session. If you would like to see more examples of Express Yourself, you can go to drury.edu/debate. And remember, next time you have a difference of opinion on any topic, stick to the facts and never make it personal. Keep your emotions out of it, and when you're ready, express yourself. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.